everybody, it's Lorie Brown with empowerednurses.org, and today I have a special guest with me, Sharon Dopak. Sharon is a registered nurse, and I actually met Sharon at the National Nurses in Business Association, and their annual conference is coming up in October. And Sharon's a nurse in California, and she's also worked in other states, so we're just going to chat about nursing in California with mandatory nurse-patient ratios and what it's like for her. And we're also going to talk about unions. So thanks to so many of you for writing comments on my blogs, especially the one on safe patient staffing initiatives and the law that's pending before Congress right now. So I appreciate it. So anyways, welcome, Sharon.
Thank you.
I'm so
Happy
glad
to be here.
Have you. Yeah. So why don't you share with our viewers a little bit about yourself?
So I've been a nurse for 10 years. I started out working in Illinois. I did a travel stint in Minnesota and a couple of travel stints in Illinois as well. I now live in California and work here. I came out here as a traveler and then took a staff position. I work ER, ICU, PACU, IR.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Wow.
Okay. I do flight too.
It's amazing. Yeah. So
I keep busy.
Yeah, she does. And she's got this super cool product that she's developing. I can't tell you about it because of privacy issues. But as soon as it's official, she is going to apply to be on the Nurses Shark Tank at the National Nurses in Business Association.
So hopefully you'll see me there.
Yeah, so I hope she does well. And then we'll be able to announce what it is after that. So, anyways, Sharon, let's talk about your staff nursing in California. You've worked in Illinois and Minnesota previously, so how does it compare with California having mandatory patient ratios?
Well, in Illinois, the places where I worked, they tried to maintain a ratio, but there was never any sort of issue, or none of the staff ever complained. If I worked in a trauma center, if a trauma came in, you ended up with 6 patients. You ended up with 6 patients because the trauma obviously took precedence, and the nurses, whoever weren't taking that trauma, had to take over the patients that were already there. And it was just hard. It was just harder, and you dealt with it, and that was it. And as your skills get spread out, obviously you can't give as much care as you'd like to give to the patients that you have. As more get loaded onto you.
Yeah. So when you were telling me in California, when you got a heavy patient, a higher acuity patient, like one that required hourly AccuChecks, they took a patient away from you and got you additional staff.
Yeah. So it's really just it's a non-issue, and it's not really something that anybody would even question. If a ER patient suddenly becomes an ICU patient, if you had 4 patients, then 2 of them would quickly be given up. I feel as if you didn't even need to speak up here in California, as opposed to in Illinois, where it was kind of frowned upon to speak up. Like, you really weren't cutting it if you couldn't take on those 6 patients. The expectation was just like, you have to learn to roll with it like everybody else does. And here at the places where I've worked, patient becomes ICU, the charge nurse immediately steps in and says, okay, we need to take a couple of your patients away from you. You didn't need to come forward and say that, which is, I think, really nice.
Yeah.
Because I think there's this kind of expectation that you can handle anything.
So it's a different culture, you would say, because of the mandatory staffing laws? Or?
Yeah, definitely just different culture. And it's just, it's not something that's really up for conversation. If you have an ICU patient, then you should not have other patients.
Yeah.
3 other patients.
So you were saying how the institutions you work at in California are major medical centers, but maybe some of the smaller ones that don't have like an in-house float team may not have that option?
Well, if there's no float nurse at places where I've worked, then it gets a little hairier because there really is nobody if everybody has their 4 patients already and one of them becomes ICU. Now it's a question of, does the charge nurse take that patient?
Mm-hmm.
And at those places, the culture is similar to Illinois, where it's like, well, this is what we got. Like, they're more accommodating. The charge nurses are, where they'll say, okay, well, what can I do to help you?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a nursing shortage, so sometimes you don't have as many staff as you'd like to have. And that's just how it's been for a while.
So I think we were talking previously, you believe that the hospitals in California, safety of the patients is their number one priority.
More often than not, yeah.
Yeah. And so are you in favor of the mandatory minimum staffing laws?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And again, I feel like the different places I've worked in, the culture can, even if you're only in California, the culture of the unit can kind of dictate like the acuity level that you have. But and that's something that needs to be discussed as well. But more often than not, the unit will see that you're out of ratio, and because it's the law and because it's mandatory that you have this ratio, they'll, you don't have to fight for it.
Yeah.
For help or whatever else. So it's a little bit better culture overall.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, I had initially called you because the UC system, the nurses were going to go on strike. So what is your experience with unions?
I really don't have much experience with them. I've never worked at a place that's unionized, except as a traveler, in which case I wasn't part of the union anyways. Mm-hmm. At the places where I've worked alongside people that were in the union at that hospital, all of them seemed to love it. Nobody had any complaints except maybe union dues, but it wasn't something that was negotiable in their mind. Like, of course, they would just pay it because they want the support of the union. So I've worked at places in Illinois where unions were trying to mobilize, and I know that, and this was when I was a new nurse, and I didn't know that much about anything really, and management would come and talk to us and be like, look, there might be unions coming by. You really don't want a union here. It's going to cause problems for you. And we'd be like, oh, okay. And I don't even remember the reasons they gave for why we didn't want a union. But other than, you'll have to pay all these dues and they don't do much for you and whatever else they said.
But the nurses were happy.
I think they just we were busy and overworked and really didn't take the time to think much about it. We just said, okay, great.
Well, my son, my middle son, Jordan, he just got a job at Rite Aid, and they have a union. So this is my first experience with it, too. But they did pay him a little more to cover his union dues.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of how it is here.
Yeah. So I just felt for these UC nurses, who were anticipating having to go out on strike and thinking about, if I was in that position, would I be able to leave my patients and go out on strike? Or would I be able to cross the picket line to take care of these patients? So what are your thoughts on that?
So it's interesting. I was just having a conversation yesterday with a nurse that worked the strike as a traveler. And it was, so the strike, as she explained it to me, was ancillary staff. But the nurses that left were just leaving in solidarity with the ancillary staff, and she worked alongside staff nurses that were on an oncology unit, and they said, these are our patients that we've known for a long time, like we can't just abandon them, like this is patient abandonment in their minds. And so they continued working. I don't know what kind of pushback they got from the staff members that left, that this traveler girl was taking the place of. I have friends that work at UCSD, and through social media I saw that they were out there on the picket lines, and I think I would be there too, in solidarity with the people that I work with. I think the people that you work with makes the job or breaks the job.
Yeah.
And so, the people I would support the people that support me,
Yeah. Well, and
even if it costs me money.
yeah, and I think that nurses need to stick together to advance our profession. I think that, we all have different opinions on things, but we do need to stick together to improve what's happening, whether it be for patient ratios or, what an idea is to improve patient care. We need to stick together.
Yeah. I think we can sometimes, we're really, really good at advocating for others, but not for ourselves.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
So, yes, I agree.
Great.
100%.
So, do you want to share a little bit more about working in California, the types of jobs that you have, and what you're doing?
So right now I'm predominantly working in the emergency room. I do IR, interventional radiology, from time to time. I teach a little bit, and I love it here. I don't know how there's a shortage in California. I guess the shortage isn't nearly as bad as they've been projecting over the years, but California still has this shortage that I don't know where your viewers are all coming from, but
all
come
over.
out here. It's great. Do you see what's behind us here?
I love it here.
It's amazing, and I would never go anywhere else after being here. So,
wow. Now, one of the people commented about LVNs, and does the laws protect LVNs, especially in long-term care? And I know you can't speak to long-term care, but what are your thoughts as far as acute care?
So in the ED, I work with some LVNs, and they'll do fast-track patients, and we still keep them in ratio. Obviously, they won't end up getting an ICU patient,
Right.
even even if they get a patient that needs IV antibiotics, we usually take over, or if there's something that we have to do that they can't do. But yeah, they keep them at a ratio of 4, and then I would imagine that that's the same in LTACs. I'd be curious to know too. I did.
I don't think it's the same.
No, I did teach clinicals.
They have like 50 patients.
Yeah, and I didn't even know that until I taught clinicals once, and they sent me to an LTAC, and I was in shock. I'd never been in an LTAC before, and there I was, like, talking to nurses that had 16 patients, or there were 2 nurses for the entire building, and there I was trying to show the student the morning meds, and I'm like, we're barely going to get through 4 of them by the time an hour passes, and you kind of want to give like the 9 o'clock meds within an hour time frame, and they're like, oh yeah, sometimes we don't finish morning meds until 1 in the afternoon, which is crazy. Like,
it is crazy. I think that nurses need to get together to reform long-term care as well.
Yeah, because it's gotten more complicated. It's not just about like cleaning people up. So,
well, I know. This just seems like a natural segue, but I'm going to go there. There was a case recently with a nurse. I don't know if you've heard about it in Pennsylvania. It was President Clinton's press secretary. His father was in a long-term care. He was there for 4 days, and he fell and hit his head. The nurse was supposed to do neuro checks every hour. And for 8 hours later, he was found dead from a subdural. And now, this is the worst part about it. And you may see my blog before I release this video. But the worst part about it is the nurse is being charged criminally for involuntary manslaughter.
Wow.
And it makes me so sad because it's clear negligence. And she tried to cover it up, which, if you have a problem, the worst thing you can do is cover it up, because fraud is way worse than anything. If you didn't do your job, that's one thing, but don't try and cover it up.
Yeah, and that's what I try to say to nurses that I work with. There was one hospital I worked at in an emergency room here in California where they were trying to do team nursing, where in one pod you'd have 12 patients and 3 nurses assigned there, and they wanted one nurse to do treatments on 6 patients, and then the other nurse to do treatments on the other 6 patients, and then the third one to oversee it. It was the strangest thing. Eventually, it got nixed, but for like a couple of weeks, they were trying it out, which completely ignored the fact that like that's out of ratio. Like the law says, patients have to have a nurse assigned to them, and somebody has to be assigned to all 12 of those patients. How is the assignment working if one person's giving a treatment to 2 of the patients that are supposed to belong to somebody else? Like, it really just didn't make much sense. But in those cases, like, how could you possibly, be accountable for, hourly AccuChecks or whatever else? And that's, it's just so sad that, like, the nurses that were going along with it because they wanted to please management were just like, oh, I didn't get to this because I was so busy. And I tell them, like, you can't go to court and say, like, I was too busy to do this.
Right.
Like, you just can't.
Yeah.
You can't say, oh, well, I had 6 patients, so of course I didn't do this treatment that needed to be done in a timely manner.
Yeah.
Whether it's neurochecks or whatever. And it is kind of scary how they just will take overwhelming assignments.
Well, my concern, and that's a great point, I was, back when I started, they did team nursing, and it was different, and I just felt more fulfilled with the primary care because I knew that I was responsible for everything. I knew it was very clear. And attorneys tend to see whoever's name's on the chart, they get sued. But my concern about that case in Pennsylvania is that was clearly negligence. There's no question about it. But is it a criminal offense? And if we start charging nurses criminally, we are not going to have any nurses. It's one thing to take your livelihood with your license, but it's another thing to take your freedom with a criminal matter. So that case just extremely distresses me. It bothers me that because it was a Clinton's press secretary that
that's the really distressing thing about it. The first thing I think of with that is how many times did that happen prior to that patient where they routinely gave somebody, I don't know how many other patients this nurse had, but let's say she had, let's just say 4 patients.
Well, it was probably like 50. 40, maybe 30.
But let's say 4. And one of them has like these hourly, or 2 of them has hourly neurochecks, and you get one patient that is difficult, or you have to be in the room for an hour, and like you can't be in 3 places at once.
Right.
But how many times did that happen before this person? And it's just like, well, there weren't any changes in their neuro status, so the night you got through the night and it was okay. And,
right.
And that's the one thing with their job is like usually things are okay, but we have to prepare for the worst.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know like how long that had been going on.
Yeah. So, any last words on?
On nursing,
anything,
on ratios,
open conversation here.
More people should become nurses. I love it. It's great.
That's wonderful.
So, that's it.
So you can tell this was completely unrehearsed, and that's fine. And there's, of course, an airplane going over us. But I do want to thank you so much, Sharon, for coming and spending time with us, sharing your knowledge of being a nurse in California with our viewers, what unions are based on your experience and view of it is, and your thoughts on mandatory staffing ratios, and just sharing your experience and being an instructor and whatnot. And I'm super excited for your new project that's coming out.
Yes.
It's going to change nursing. It is. You won't believe it. I can't wait to share it with you. So
it'll be coming.
It's coming.
Really soon.
It's coming. And I wish her the best on Shark Tank at the National Nurses in Business Association. And until next time, happy nursing. Enjoy. I hope you're having beautiful weather now, finally, where you're at. And And we'll catch you next time. Leave your comments below if you want to ask Sharon anything. I'll contact her with your questions as well.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions about whatever.
Well, great. All right, thanks again. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Sharon.